spent a whole session telling us how the movie should be made. Prabhupada said when the time comes he would direct it, and I never quite understood what he meant by that, maybe through Super Soul or whether he would do it personally. But he did speak at length about it. But he was very serious, and we took that instruction very seriously for some time, and Damodar and I used to go out of the temple and watch normal movies because we thought that would help us, or maybe we rationalized that way, that we could only fulfill Prabhupada's instructions by being cognizant with contemporary filmmaking.
And I remember Srila Prabhupada came down from his quarters and we were all going to go to the Brooklyn Botanical Gardens together. So there was a car. I don't know how I got to ride in the car again, but I was in the back seat and the two devotees dressed up like Radha and Krishna were in the back seat. Brahmananda was there, Srila Prabhupada was there, and a driver. And the devotee was dressed up like Krishna asked Srila Prabhupada if she could fan Prabhupada, and Prabhupada said no. The devotee never accepts service from Krishna. So he was playing along, although later we found out we were not doing the right thing. And also, before we got in the car, he had come down from his quarters and we were standing on the sidewalk. We had made enough garlands for Srila Prabhupada and Radha and Krishna. But one garland got lost or something, so we put a garland on Krishna and then went to put one on Srila Prabhupada. And as we were putting it on, he was taking it off and putting it on the devotee dressed like Radharani.
When Prabhupada saw how disappointed we were, he saved the situation by saying, well, I can understand by this impulse that you want to know about the spiritual world, Radha and Krishna, Goloka. I will explain it to you. And then he just sat down and he started reciting the Brahma Samhita prayers and gave a very elaborate explanation of those prayers, the Chintamani Dham and Radha and Krishna, how they look, how they appear, what they do. He transported us to Goloka by his consciousness. When he finished, we were leaving Brooklyn Botanical Gardens. Prabhupada ordered me, this place is very nice, and this will make a very nice location for a temple. And we want to build a temple. So you arrange to get this land donated. We'll make it a very nice temple. But Prabhupada had such a high vision that he would try for. So I had to do it. This park is a municipal park by the city of New York.
The film Guru Dev was shot in the spring of 1969. We were waiting for Srila Prabhupada to arrive in New York at the airport. The chair was prepared for him, a Vyasasana of sorts, and everybody was gathered. United flight came in. The kirtan got ecstatic. There's Subal, there's Kanchan Bala and Leela Sukha. And Srila Prabhupada arrived. Of course, there was a great deal of commotion. I couldn't get right at him immediately, but there he is, walking down the aisle. And of course, a furious kirtan going on. Everybody else in the airport wondering what was happening. Srila Prabhupada is arriving from Los Angeles. These airport arrivals were certainly the most ecstatic and intense times because we had been away from him, he had been away from us, and the preparations were frantic and everybody's rushing out to get there in time and waiting, and the plane arrives, and then Srila Prabhupada's lotus feet make their landing on our ground, and we were so happy. The camera that I used couldn't compensate for the strong lighting in back of Srila Prabhupada, so when I was at that angle, you get a silhouette. I tried to get that word united on the tail of the plane in the shots because once again we were united with Srila Prabhupada, and that was our life.
And now he's sitting there in New York, And he said things like, you could chant any name of God, either Allah or any name of God that's bona fide. But because we're followers of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, we chant the Hare Krishna mantra.
There was a whole bunch of us waiting at this one gate, and all of a sudden somebody saw Prabhupada coming from this other gate. And he said, "Oh, Srila Prabhupada's coming from over there," and we all ran to greet Srila Prabhupada. And we fell down at his lotus feet. I was a new devotee, so I didn't know how long you're supposed to stay down. So I stayed down for quite a while, and then I kind of peeked my head up to see if everybody had gotten up yet. Everyone was up, and Prabhupada was standing right over above me. I looked up into his lotus eyes, and he went and patted my head. So I got up. So that was my first memory of Prabhupada. I was initiated by mail probably a few months before he had come to New York.
Between the heads and shoulders of the people just in the terminal, I caught intermittent glimpses of Prabhupada. I had never seen him, his actual form, and my senses were not very disturbed. I had not been a drug taker. I maybe experimented with each of the available drugs at the time once, but otherwise I was a trained observer, physiology labs and so on. But I was certain he was not walking like an ordinary person. If you look at their head, it'd be sort of bobbing. He was moving smoothly like a swan or other water bird floating on the water. That was my first glimpse of him. And at that time, actually, I saw he was effulgent. And that was the first time I'd ever seen any effulgence like that. It was real. I hadn't had any vision like that in dreams or any religious experiences like that. It was as real as I see this door. And as I say, I was a trained observer. And then paid obeisances, and rising up from the obeisances, I looked up and he was looking at me with that penetrating look that gave the one being looked at the understanding that this great personality sees our soul. In retrospect, we were so receptive. You see such nice faces, as Prabhupada says, but actually we had no position, no power, no use until Prabhupada joined us to him. But I remember one time when I did go to the airport with Prabhupada and I was distributing prasadam, and we were having a kirtan, and the airport authorities made us stop. And I was at first distributing prasadam to the non-devotees who were onlooking. When they stopped our kirtan, Prabhupada was a little bit peeved, and he told me to come over with the prasadam and distribute the prasadam to the devotees instead of to the onlookers. And he said, charity begins at home. You see those garlands, they were all gardenias. And we heard from the devotees on the west coast that Prabhupada liked gardenias because they were very fragrant. So I used to buy the flowers for the temple, and we used to go to the flower shops and buy day-old gardenias, which were cheaper. Even though they were cheaper, they were more fragrant, because I think Prabhupada had mentioned that a flower smells sweetest when it's dying. They weren't as fragrant when they were fresh, but they were more fragrant when they were older. And Prabhupada said that the flowers that didn't have a fragrance were useless Kali Yuga flowers, so therefore he liked gardenias. Whereas some of those carnations that we put in this garland were not very fragrant.
Srila Prabhupada got in the car in the airport and went back to Manhattan. Srila Prabhupada's apartment was still at 26 2nd Avenue. And the devotees had repainted it and refinished it, and redid the floors, so it was all gleaming and beautiful. Srila Prabhupada walked up the stairs. His apartment was on the 2nd floor. And as he looked in the door into the apartment, he turned to us and said, "My old home." And that really made us happy. And we had painted the ceiling blue to look like the sky, and it was a wonderful reunion.
I remember that globe that Prabhupada had in his room in 26 Second Avenue. And I remember one time I was there with Prabhupada, and he looked at the globe. I think he may have spun it a little bit. And he said if they only knew my plans, they would put me away. They would lock me up. Because he was talking about plans to expand the movement all over the world. And at that time there were no branches in foreign countries. And it was just like, kind of like a joke. Somebody would go to Russia, somebody would go to China, somebody would go to England. And we'd all used to dream about it. We never really thought that the movement would expand beyond the hippie enclaves in New York and San Francisco and some college campuses. And even then, there was one college campus in Buffalo that Rupanuga Prabhu was running a center at, which was very successful. But we never really dreamed that Hare Krishna would be popular with college students, because we thought it would only appeal to dropouts. I never thought that the movement was going to expand beyond the counterculture. And 61 Second Avenue, before we took it over, was a tuxedo parlor. So we retained those three-way mirrors and made alcoves out of them, and I think we put the Vyasa sign in one of the alcoves. There was one letter where Brahmananda wrote to Prabhupada about the tuxedo palace, and he still called it a palace, when it was hardly a palace. Prabhupada wrote one of the letters, Brahmananda has found me a palace.
The New York devotees had just acquired this new temple, the second New York temple at 61 Second Avenue. And they were writing to Prabhupada telling him that the new temple was just like a palace. And I was feeling a lot of anxiety about this, because I was thinking, Prabhupada's coming and he's going to be so disappointed when he sees this temple. They're telling him it's just like a palace, but it's just another storefront. It's a little bit nicer than the first storefront, but it's just another storefront. And I was thinking he's going to be angry, he'll be so disappointed, it's going to be horrible. And so Prabhupada came in and he sat on the Vyasa-san, and he said, I prayed to Krishna to send me one moon, but Krishna has sent me so many moon-like boys and girls. That's what he said.
I remember one lecture Prabhupada gave there. He began saying Om Agana Timirandasya, and then he just stopped Timirandasya, and he just lectured on that. He had his Bhagavatam open to lecture on the Bhagavatam verse, but he didn't lecture on that verse. He lectured on Om Agana Timirandasya. He didn't go beyond that, the importance of the spiritual mastery. There was one gentleman, an elderly gentleman, who walked one day into the temple, and he had a letter from Prabhupada. And the letter said that, Dear Mr. Such and Such, so when I come to New York, you can come see me. Okay. Brahmananda had me take him over to Prabhupada's apartment, and a block or so away. And the man was very respectful. He was connected with a yoga society in New York. He said to Srila Prabhupada, Swamiji, I like your movement very much, but one thing is that one of your disciples said that Swami such and such is a rascal. And it always seemed to me that he was a very holy man, and I don't understand why your disciple would say that you said that he's a rascal. And Prabhupada said that, who has said this? And the man said, you didn't say? Prabhupada said, if they say that I have said, and I have not said, then they are rascal. And then the man was pacified. Then Prabhupada said a few things, and Prabhupada pulled a book out of his bookshelf, a small hardbound blue book, and opened it up and gave it to the man. He said, you know this book? The man looked at it, oh, Swami such and such, Dr. such and such, oh, Vedanta Society, oh yes. And he was quite pleased at seeing something that he was familiar with. And Prabhupada opened it up and he said, read the translation. The man read the translation. Always think of me, devote yourself to me, worship me, offer your homage to me. Prabhupada said, yes, he has done it nicely. He is a very good scholar. Then the commentary, what does he say? The man began reading. It is not to Krishna that we have to surrender, but to the unborn, impersonal something something. Prabhupada said, just see. Therefore I say they are all rascals. And then Prabhupada began explaining why such persons were rascals. He quoted, of course, Namam duskrita namudha prapadyante naradama maya pratagyana asura bhavamashita. That they're the miscreants, lowest of mankind. Their knowledge is stolen by illusion. They're demonic. Because just see, Krishna is saying me and they're saying not Krishna. Therefore I say. Then Prabhupada said that sometimes strong words are needed to arouse a sleeping man. And then Prabhupada said, anyway, it is not my saying, it is Krishna's saying. And Prabhupada gave a dismissive sort of shrug. He said, what can I do? Prabhupada did one initiation at 61 2nd Avenue. So Prabhupada was walking to his apartment. There's still a photo of Srila Prabhupada walking, surrounded by devotees chanting and dancing. And they're having a really ecstatic kirtan. The fire yajna is completed, everybody's initiated, people have their names. And Prabhupada's walking back to his apartment with his usual aristocratic gait, with his head slightly raised. Everyone's chanting. Prabhupada didn't say anything. Then Prabhupada just said, we have increased the disciplic succession from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu.
There were these girls that, in the New York temple. They were living at home and they would come to the temple. They were going to high school and they were really nice girls. Prabhupada wanted them to stay in school and stay with their families, and they would come to the temple. And I was more of a hippie. I had left home. I was in a different situation. So these girls, when Prabhupada would come, they seemed very juvenile to me, but they really loved Prabhupada. And when he would come, they would scream and treat him like a rock and roll star. I was really quite embarrassed by it, but they were very loving and very devoted. So Prabhupada would come in and they would go, Swamiji, Swamiji, and scream and yell. And then at one point Prabhupada called them into his room and he said, you are the children of the society, so therefore you must be very grave.
Saradia and I were married in May of '69, and shortly thereafter I returned to New York because I was studying bookbinding at the time to help set up the ISKCON Press. And I was very stunned when I was told that Prabhupada wanted us to stay in his quarters. There was an apartment behind 26 2nd Avenue. Those were considered the most holy places by all of us because that was where Prabhupada had his rooms. And although Prabhupada was not there in New York at the time, those were Prabhupada's rooms. And yet Prabhupada instructed that me and Saradia, having just recently been married and needing a place to stay, should stay in his rooms. And that deeply impressed me that he was willing to suggest that. And indeed we did stay there. We stayed there for probably a month or two in the summer of '69.
He was looking around the room on one of these evenings and he said, I want each one of you to open a temple. I want each and every one of you to open a temple. And because I'm a very impetuous person, and I was more impetuous then because I was only 16 years old. So I said, even the girls, Swamiji? He said, yes, why not? There is no difference. And he said, in Nityananda's absence, Janava Devi was preaching like anything. There is no difference between boys and girls. That was very sweet.
I was very late for my wedding. Srila Prabhupada was going to marry Advaita Janai that day. And I walked in and I had my hair down, which I didn't know you weren't supposed to do. And Srila Prabhupada, he looked at me and he said, Balai is looking like the goddess of fortune. And then he married us. And after the marriage ceremony and the installation ceremony, Srila Prabhupada was sitting on the Vyasasana and he was eating a popper. And he broke the popper into several pieces and he said, all glories to the provider of prasadam, all glories to the preparer of prasadam, and all glories to the eater of prasadam.